I know we are running late, and I know that many of you are thinking about lunch, so I'll try to be brief, and I'll try to be interesting as well, and see if I can teach you a few things that might be new to you. But first off, who am I, and what am I here to talk about? My name is Nils. I'm 36 years old. I'm Swedish. I live in Dubai with my family, wife, and 2 kids, 2 small kids, both under 5. I'm also the CEO and co-founder of a company called SaltSide Technologies, which I think that most of you haven't heard about. But it's a company that I like a lot, and we build online marketplaces in frontier markets. So to give you an idea of what I mean when I say frontier markets, we have 600 people working for us in Nigeria, in Ghana, in the West Africa, and we have operations in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh in South Asia. So today I'm not going to talk that much about SaltSide. What I'd like to focus in on is how we as a company and I as an entrepreneur evaluate opportunities, and how I look at the land of opportunity going forward. So to do that, I want to compare my native Sweden with Bangladesh. And I think most of you know where Sweden is, but I'm not sure everyone knows where Bangladesh is, to be honest. So just to make sure we are aligned, Bangladesh is bordering India to the east, bordering West Bengal, to be specific. And the size of this country is roughly 1/3 of Sweden, or half of Finland. So the usual way for an internet company, e-commerce company, classifieds company to evaluate where you should go and invest your money is to look at a pretty standard set of metrics. So let's start with those metrics and see what we come up with. The first metric that we always talk about and we always compare is GDP per capita. And I don't think there's any surprise to you that if you look at Bangladesh and you look at Sweden, Bangladesh is not doing very well. The other metric that might be interesting for an internet company or an e-commerce company is to look at how many of the population actually have access to a bank account. Because if you want people to buy your goods online, it might be good that they have a bank account, which you then can tie a credit card or a debit card to and charge for your services. Bangladesh, unfortunately, is at 8%. Sweden, on the other hand, is 99%. As an online startup, obviously we want to look at how many people have access to the internet. So let's use that as our last metrics. 9% of Bangladesh. This is not the official figure, but I don't believe that much in the official figure. This is what we think is the number of people online in Bangladesh at the moment. In Sweden, obviously, the number is much higher. So if you look at the world in this way, it's pretty obvious where you should go. And I think that's also why, if you look around this place, you see a lot of startups doing e-commerce in Sweden or in Finland. But you don't see that many people doing e-commerce or online marketplaces in Bangladesh. So let me explain how we got to our conclusion. And I want to do that by taking a step back. And as many people before me have said, look at this from a very long-term perspective. So let's not look at the next 12 months or 12 years. Let's look at the next century, just for the sake of it. Or, as I said, I have 2 kids, age under 5. Let's look at this from the perspective of what my kids will see when they're my age. So in 30 years, how will the world look like? And I'm not doing this because I am a die-hard idealist in any way. I'm doing it because I think it makes business sense to take this approach. And so does McKinsey. They've done a survey where they looked at 17 categories in the States, consumer categories. The market leader in 1925 remained the market leader in 2000. So for 75 years, the market leader managed to stay number one or number two. And if you take that approach, you look at a couple of different KPIs. And the first one that we look at is how many people is actually above poverty line in these markets. Because at least we're out of the absolute worst part. And if you take that approach, the numbers for Sweden is pretty obvious. It's more or less the size of the population. But let's look at Bangladesh, 92.4 million. So here we have a situation where Bangladesh is all of a sudden 10 times bigger than Sweden when it comes to some kind of addressable market. Let's also look at how many of these, or let's also look at another metric which a lot of people previously have talked about as well, and that is the mobile phone penetration and mobile phone access. And that's not only interesting for the sake of it, it's actually interesting because if you have a mobile phone, you have something to buy, or rather you have something to sell. And as an online classifieds company, that's the starting point. And as a side note, 65% or 60% of the inventory on our site in Bangladesh is mobile phones. So let's look at this. Sweden, 7.8 million, a good figure. But this is better. This is almost 8 times as many people with a mobile phone in Bangladesh than in Sweden. And now we see that the picture is starting to get a little bit more maybe tilted, or a little bit more complex is maybe the right word. So let's look at another factor. We're now seeing that Bangladesh has a much, much bigger population, even if you look at just the people with mobile phones. Let's look at the age of these people. Because remember, we're saying we're investing in the future. Then I think it's pretty interesting to look at how old is the population in these markets. So 42 years in Sweden. So remember I said I'm 36. This means that in Sweden I'm still young. In Bangladesh, I'm way above middle-aged. So back to the GDP question that we started with. And when we looked at GDP per capita, the picture was pretty clear. But let's look at the growth rate for this. So if you look at the last 20 years to start with, Bangladesh, or let's start with Sweden. Sweden has seen a growth rate of 2.6%. Low, stable, healthy growth. Bangladesh has seen 6.1%. And that's actually interesting because it's not the question of Bangladesh going up and down. It's actually a pretty steady growth over a very long time. And to give you an idea what this means in terms of improvement in life situations, it means that 20 years ago, the life expectancy for someone born in Bangladesh was 59 years old. Now, it's 69. So in 10 years, or in 20 years, we've increased the life expectancy with 10 years, on average, in a country with a population of 150 million people. That's pretty cool. Now, that's the history, right? So what about the future? Yeah, let's look at that. And let's ask the economist, how will this look in the next 50 years? This is how it will look. For the near future, Sweden is way ahead. as the history shows, growing steadily and nicely. But as we reach some kind of inflection point, Bangladesh takes off. And when, as I said, my kids are in my age, and maybe they're here presenting Saltside for you, they will look at Bangladesh as a bigger market than Sweden. So those are all macro figures. What also is interesting when you do your due diligence on a new market is obviously to go to this market and you ask the people around you, how do you feel? What do you think about the future? To get a feel for the country, basically. And luckily, I can use Boston Consulting Group, who has done a survey on this in a range of countries, among them Bangladesh and Sweden. And what they've shown is that in Sweden, 19% of the population believes that the next generation is going to have it better than they have. So, to some extent, that is an expression of the Swedish mentality. It's not very optimistic, necessarily. But let's look at Bangladesh. 81%. 81% compared to 19%. So, to sum this up, when Saltside and myself looked at the markets we want to approach, we thought about it from the perspective, do we want to invest our future and my kids' future in a country which is beautiful, it's idyllic, it's clean, it's well-functioning, and it's wealthy. But it's also actually pretty old and at least relatively stagnant. Or do we want to invest in a country which is broken in many, many ways and where life is difficult for a lot of people, but where you can see some kind of tidal wave of improvements coming in on the horizon? And I think now you know at least why Saltside and myself chose what we did, and hopefully you also have another market to consider when you evaluate your next expansion opportunities. So thank you very much.